Hello everyone, welcome. We're so glad you're all here virtually. My name is Sarah Hallenbeck. I'm the co-owner of Women and Children First. We're one of the last remaining feminist bookstores in the United States. We are so excited for tonight's conversation with Emily Gray Tedrowe and Rebecca Makkai in celebration of the release of Emily's latest novel, The Talented Miss Farwell, which I adored, and I can't wait for you all to discover. We begin our virtual events, as we begin all of our events held in the store, with a land acknowledgement. So please join me in acknowledging that the land on which this bookstore stands, is the occupied unceded territory of the Peoria, the Potawatomi, the Miami, and the Sioux people. We encourage all of you to learn more about land acknowledgements and the rightful owners of the land where you're viewing tonight's event by visiting nativeland.ca. Thank you so much. Women and Children First is now partially open. We are allowing 12 people in the store at a time. And of course, everyone must wear a mask in the store. So we hope that if you're in Chicago, you'll come stop by. Or you can also shop anytime at womenandchildrenfirst.com. We are going to continue to host all of our events, like the one we're having tonight, virtually until 2021. Now on to a few housekeeping notes before we get started. Be sure to drop all your questions for Emily in the Ask a Question box, which is located at the bottom of your screen. And also, be sure to buy the book. There's a really handy buy the book box also located at the bottom of your screen. That will connect you to womenandchildrenfirst.com, where you can order The Talented Miss Farwell. All right. Oh, and be sure to talk to one another using the chat bar on the side of the screen. There's handy applause and other emojis that you can use to show Emily some love. All right, now on to the event. Rebecca Makkai is the Chicago-based author of the novels The Great Believers, The 100-Year House, and The Borrower, as well as the short story collection Music for Wartime. The Great Believers was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize and the National Book Award, and received the ALA Carnegie Medal and the LA Times Book Prize, among many other honors. Makkai is on the MFA faculty of Sierra Nevada College and Northwestern, and she is the artistic director of Story Studio Chicago. Emily Gray Tedrowe is also a Chicago-based author, a dear friend of our bookstore, and she is the author of the novels The Talented Miss Farwell, Blue Stars, and Commuters. She earned a PhD in English literature from New York University and a BA from Princeton. She has received an Illinois Arts Council Award as well as fellowships from Ragdale, Virginia Center for the Creative Arts, and Sony's Writers Conference. She's also a frequent book reviewer at USA Today. The Talented Miss Farwell is the perfect book for this season. It was such a wonderful way to fall into fall. It's just an absorbing escapade, but not at all frivolous. Emily's latest novel introduces the double life of a young art collector named Becky. Emily masterfully pushes her readers to tumble deeper and deeper into the psyche of Becky and her limitless ability to rationalize her addiction. I just love that wobbly uneasiness as we begin to question who we, the readers, are rooting for and why. So thank you so much, Emily, for giving us all this amazing page turner right when we need it. And please welcome Rebecca Makkai and Emily Gray Tedrowe.
Yay!
Thank you. Yay.
All right.
Hi, Rebecca. I have to say, can I just first thank Sarah? Oh my gosh, Sarah, thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Women and Children First. You are truly like just a piece of joy in my world right now. And of course, as all Chicagoans and outside Chicago knows, Women and Children First is just an institution here. We're so lucky to have them. And we need to keep supporting them. So please, please think of them when it's time for your book buying needs. So thank you for having me. And hi, Rebecca. Okay, I think, Rebecca, I can't hear you, so maybe hit your audio.
Yeah.
Try again.
Can you hear me?
I can. Now I can hear you.
Okay. We've been talking for like a good 10 minutes before this, and then somehow it got mysteriously, it's all good. So that was, probably someone muted me, so we weren't overwhelmed by my cheering as we were introduced. I understand. So I'm so excited. What we're going to do is we're going to talk for a little bit first, and then we're going to smoothly segue into Emily reading the beginning of the novel. And then we're going to talk some more. And if you guys want to ask questions, just notice that the question box is different than the comment box. So the comment box is for talking about Emily's lipstick, which is amazing. And the question box is for questions about her craft and career.
I'm a little distracted by the comment box. It's like your life for me, and you too, Rebecca. I mean, it's so great to see people I know and love, and thank you guys for being here.
Yay. All right. So we have met before, full disclosure. Actually, it was kind of fun because our mutual friend Anna Leigh was messaging both of us today with a photo of the night she introduced us, which was years ago now.
I know. An amazing dinner, and she sent us that picture, and yeah, it was so great to see us back in the day.
And the reason I'm bringing this up is not to brag, but to say, well, I guess I'm still bragging, that we are in the same critique group. We're 2 of 7 in our critique group, which means that I got to see this book very, very early. You know, the finished copy arrived at my house last week, and now I haven't read actually the final version yet, but I'm very, very excited to. So I would love to talk to you a little bit about the character, who I know has not changed that fundamentally from her earliest conception until now, except in the ways that she's gotten stronger and stronger. So I would love to talk to you about writing a really difficult character. And we all know that when it's a female character, readers are, for whatever reason, going to be far less patient with hijinks, Machiavellian impulses, anything untoward. Personally, I love that stuff, but the publishing industry doesn't always, and readers don't always. So at the same time, but this is a character who is so incredibly deliciously compelling in all of the mistakes she makes and in all of the really kind of unforgivable things she does that are nonetheless justified. So was there a moment early, I don't think I know, although I saw this early, what's the moment where you cross the Rubicon into going, I'm going to get behind a character who obviously you as a person don't believe in large scale fraud, so, or would not personally.
I'm getting a little bit of a on Rebecca there, but maybe I'll talk and she will come back. So Rebecca was asking, I think she's moving to a better Wi-Fi. That's good. I'll chat while she's moving.
Okay, yeah, I think it's my fault.
Okay. So yeah, my character, Becky Farwell, embezzles tens of millions of dollars over 20 years. And this is loosely based on a true story of a woman who did this in a very small Illinois town. And in my book, Becky Farwell does this, not just because she wants money, but because she gets obsessed with owning contemporary art. And this is something that comes as a surprise, right? She is a small town government worker. She's a single woman. She's an orphan. Both her parents died relatively young. And she's a beloved member of her small town. And one day, almost like a thunderbolt, she becomes obsessed with looking at art. She sees a particular painting, and it touches off something that sort of changes her. And she absolutely needs not just to look at art, but to own it. And so one small $500 mistake in the books where she works leads her to this opportunity to buy a piece of art. And you would think that maybe it would stop there, but instead, even though she does pay back that first $500, it kicks her into an obsession that leads her into a chain of embezzling more and more money. And as she embezzles, she pays some of it back. So it's like this kind of sick cycle of taking money from the town, but putting it back, you know, with some extras, maybe funding the Little League team, maybe, you know, buying a new basketball court or paying for the prom. So she can tell herself that she's doing okay, that she's not a bad person. And I think what I did, Rebecca, when you mentioned like sort of this inner psyche issue is, you know, I was fascinated by what it takes to sustain a double life like that. You know, when you live in the town where you are committing this crime, you know, she didn't take the money and flee. She stays there and she just keeps bleeding the town. So that means she sees her neighbors. She sees them on the street. She sees them at meetings. She sees them at church. And I was like, what kind of person can face to face have those pleasantries while still really damaging the place that she lives? And in a way, I sort of set up the art obsession as a little bit of a justification, because I'm curious, like you said, you know, we don't seem to be able to handle unlikable female protagonists. And so I'm curious about, like, for example, if she just stole this money, if someone steals all this money and then they use it to take fabulous vacations, or, you know, they buy a lot of jewelry, or they get, you know, massages every 2 hours. I mean, is that less justifiable than if someone becomes so attached to the beauty of art that they need to own it? I mean, probably not. But in my mind, that's what makes Becky kind of continue what she's doing, is she really feels like the ends justify the means for her.
Yeah. Well, and so you're basing her in part, in inspiration, on a real life character, this woman from Dixon, Illinois, who embezzled town's funds and actually in real life was buying horses.
Right.
Race horses, right?
Yeah, she poured all that money in the real life situation into breeding and showing horses. I wasn't going to write a horse book. I'm not a horse girl. I'm a girl. I just stick with what I know. Right.
So, you know, is there I feel like a challenge that I see with friends or students trying to write, quote unquote, from the headlines, which is not even what I would say you're doing, but I see, you know, people try that sometimes. They're looking at the end result of what someone did.
Yeah.
And then they're trying to reverse engineer the kind of person who would do that. And in lesser hands, that falls flat. Because they're just pulling these puppet strings, trying to get a person to do something extreme. Where you're really starting us off in this very small, you know, these very small moments, these very tiny moments of genesis for her misdeeds, for her ability to compartmentalize, for her feeling justified because of little slights in this town. And you still got her there. So can you talk a little bit about to what extent was that, and then I think this might lead in really well to you reading from the opening of the book, but before you do that, could you talk for a second about, you know, were you attached to the end result? Did you kind of surrender that and go to the beginning and see where this character would go? Or was it taking the end result and backing up from there to the kind of person who could get there?
Okay, I think one of the things I can say is that, so when I was first attracted to writing this novel, I heard this NPR story about this woman in Illinois and what she did. And I was instantly captivated, not just by the crime, but by the fact. The thing that like tipped me into, okay, I'm going to write about this, is that I heard the newscaster say that the FBI had held off arresting this person for over a month to 6 weeks because, in their words, they did not believe that a woman alone could pull off what would turn out to be the largest municipal fraud in American history. So they were essentially looking for her male co-conspirator or her boss, right? And so when I heard that, I was like, oh, yes, that is a good detail. And then what I did is I stopped reading anything about the real case. I stopped following it. I never met the real person, obviously. I couldn't meet her, but any of the people that she stole from, and I didn't follow it. So the only things I kept were the numbers. So for example, my character embezzles $50 million over 20 years, and that's the same amount that the person in real life did. So that was what I took. And I kind of reverse engineered it from that, if you can say it that way. You know, I didn't want to have to make up the numbers because that seemed like I wouldn't know what was too crazy. And it seems too crazy actually as it is, but it really happened. So I was able to take that, be like, okay, that's my reality. And everything else kind of came from my imagination.
Yeah. That and downstate Illinois, basically, right?
Right. The area, the general area. I fictionalized a small town and kind of gave it that general regional. I really wanted to write about the Midwest, and here I am in the Midwest. And so I wanted to kind of set it there. So yeah, those were the elements I kept.
And you drove down there a few times, right?
Just once. I spent a day driving around. It's a lovely place. It's a beautiful place on the Rock River. I walked in and out of stores, but you know, I didn't ask to interview anyone. I mean, the people of Dixon have been through a lot, and they are a little tired of people going down there to interview them and ask how much they've suffered. And so I just kind of took it in that weird novelist way, like little details and taking pictures of weird things and eating at the awesome diner. They got a good bookstore there too. It's called Books on First. Yeah.
Books on First?
Books on First. It's their first street, I think. Yeah.
Fantastic. So would you be willing to read to us a little bit?
Absolutely. I would love to. I thought I would read from the first few pages of the novel. And this is exciting because it's the first time I'm reading it at an event. So first I'll have a champagne and I'll toast everybody. Thank you, Caroline and Jenny. That's where this champagne came from.
Woohoo!
Okay. Chapter 1. Pearson, Illinois, 1979. 14-year-old Becky Farwell lay on the truck horn with her forearm. Daddy, let's go. Engine running, she tilted the rear view to study her eye makeup, a wash of greens running dark to light from her eyelashes to eyebrows. Greens, of course, because the magazines said all redheads had to, even indistinct blonde red mixes like her own. What she really wanted was the set that gave you 3 kinds of purple, pale violet to dusty eggplant. Becky ran a quick calculation on how much she was owed by the 4 girls she did homework for, geometry and algebra, although she could stretch up to pre-calc too, even as a 9th grader. Though for pre-calc, all she could guarantee was a B, not that any of the girls complained. Sometimes she took payment in shoes, like the almost new Tretorns she had on now, without socks because no one did. Becky flipped the mirror back with a snap. They needed cash too bad to daydream about makeup. Getting squeezed at all ends. One of her father's sayings that didn't make sense, but sure as hell got across how bad it was that spring. After another minute, she jumped down from the truck and went inside. Even though it was one of the first nice days in March, the front rooms of their farmhouse were dark and stuffy, closed in. Becky pushed up a window and propped it open with a can of beans. This morning's cereal bowls were tumbled milky white in the sink, and a thin, sticky layer of grease and dust filmed everything, but Becky had no time to wipe it up. In the family room, one patch of carpet stood out darker and new. Last week, her father had pawned the TV set, all her mother's jewelry, he thought all, Becky had hidden a few bits, and the blender. He wouldn't tell her how much he'd gotten. It's only temporary. but the crumpled receipt she'd found proved it was less than $100. "Daddy," she called from the bottom of the stairs, then ran up lightly, bracelets jingling. Have you not even showered?" For there he was, her bear-like father, curled on his side in bed, his silver hair mashed down low over his forehead, perspiration speckling his nose. Stomach flu, but there was no time for it. A buyer was driving in from Rockford, and her father was supposed to meet him at noon. "You said just turn on the engine. Daddy, it's all ready." He groaned and threw a hand over his eyes. "Show him the drills. The light track air seeder, make sure he sees that one. And the spreaders, even if he says he don't." "I can't." Becky looked wildly around the room. "How am I supposed to tell him not the Masseys or any John Deere? You can walk him back by the 2 Vicons. He'll want those. But say no. Just drills, that's our deal. Give me an hour, most. I just need to, oh God." He bolted from bed to bathroom, old terry cloth robe flying, and Becky fled before she could hear anything. On the highway, Becky knew exactly when and where to twirl the dials for music, sometimes switching from WXTV to WMMR and back again in the space of a single song. Why wouldn't they play anything other than Crystal Gale, for Christ's sake, or Kenny Rogers? She kept both hands tight on the wheel and eyes locked on the road lines. Never went a fraction over 45, not that their old truck wanted to. Nobody passing on I-50 gave a 9th grader a second look, but she knew what to do if she was pulled over. Start to cry right away, say that her boyfriend got dead drunk, and she'd been scared, and she was going straight home, swear to God, and she never would again, officer, promise. "Won't save me a ticket, but might keep them from arresting me," her father mused when he'd told her how to say it. It was 2 exits, 1 roundabout, and 4 lights from the farmhouse to the showroom, and she sweated through each one. Worst part was the left turn across traffic into the showroom driveway. Becky hung there forever, blinker on, foot hovering between brake and gas. Eventually, she made herself go, eyes half closed in the turn, and bumped down the gravelly gully. Jesus, 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 thank you. One other truck idled in their small lot facing the road. Shit, they were already here. Becky hopped out and let down the tailgate. She could only carry 2 boxes, would have to come back for the rest. "Hello," she called. The Traskers ran their own farming equipment store outside Rockford and were here to buy up inventory as cheap as they could get it, then turn around and sell it at markup, a profit too ugly to think about. "Vultures," her father said with a show of cheer, "picking us dry." They all did it. A few years ago, he had been the one to drive out to Minter's to sort out what was left. "We'll get it back," he kept telling Becky, "in the summer." He used to say, "in the spring." Before that, "It'll pick up in fall." "Good afternoon," Becky sang out to the 2 men getting slowly out of the truck, a father and son, it looked like. She'd never opened the showroom on her own before, but it helped her father dozens of times. She unlocked the doors and used the boxes to prop them open, ran ahead to the fuse box and hit the lights for the office and front section, where the harvesters were proudly parked in a neat row on the diagonal. "I'll put the coffee on," she called back, staying ahead where they couldn't see her. "Or there are sodas in back. Dad'll be here any minute." The son was kind of cute. Becky took off her cotton pullover and checked to see if she'd sweated rings on her tank top. She should go sit in the office, she knew, in that lit-up glassed-in box where invoices and catalogs were stacked up, spilling across the desk, the chairs, the metal file. But instead, she tracked the men, admiring the curls poking out from under the son's cap, his thumbs stuck in his back pockets, the mostly clear skin on his soft cheeks. Becky fluffed her bangs and was so busy working on something clever she could say to him that the older man's sudden presence made her jump. "There you are," he said low. Short and burly, bald head like a crop circle. Becky caught a whiff of minted chewing tobacco. "He said to, show you the spreaders. I mean cedars. They're just over, yeah, show me." He grabbed her elbow and pulled her toward him. Becky grunted in surprise. "Oh, shush," he said, and the combination of his tone, "Don't be silly," and her fear that the son might see or hear her, being silly, kept her quiet, even as he groped her breasts and ass, quick and rough, under the cover of the dark aisle full of pipe lengths and electrical cords. In less than a minute, it was over. She was pushed away with a friendly sort of thump on the back. and the man turned the corner alone, calling to his son, "This the only cultipacker, or do they have any better brands?" Later, when her father had arrived and taken the man and son into his office, Becky watched through the glass. The son sat down before her father did. Her dad's heartiness, his larger gestures, the other man's crossed arms and unresponsive back, Becky had to look away. For a long time, she sat on a stack of wood pallets, picking at a scab on her ankle. A creaky old fan spun slowly up by the dusty rafters. "Beck? Hey, Beck," her father called, leaning out the office door, unable to see her. "Grab 2 sodas for us, okay?" Slowly, Becky walked to the back, returning with the cold cans in her arms. In the dark, she took one of the Dr. Peppers and peeled off its tab. And then she coughed and dug back into the cavities of her nose and throat so she could hawk one perfect glob of phlegm into the soda. Opening the office door, she stamped a smile on her face and felt powered up with love for her daddy and for how little he knew. I'm gonna stop there.
Amazing.
Thank you.
So one thing that I think you're doing so well there, that you do so well throughout, is basically, you know, stacking the deck for her in many ways, like building your case for this character, that in so many ways she's been undervalued or wronged by the people of this town. That move doesn't always go that well, right?
Yeah.
And I know everyone else on the planet loved Breaking Bad. And if someone's uncle wrote Breaking Bad, I'm so sorry. But that's my example of that not working well, where it's laying it on so thick, right? Like he got fired from his job at the car wash, and his students are mean, and his wife has and he has cancer, and his wife has, she's pregnant, and his son has this condition. It's like, I got it. I was sympathizing a long time ago, and you're trying too hard, right? But you're doing something, I think, really subtle and very believable. And maybe it has to do with just the granular details of small town life, being a woman at this point in time. But you know, how did you figure out that balance of, because you've gone just far and you haven't gone too far in making us kind of hate the people around her on her behalf. And also at the same time, letting us see that actually, despite all this, she's the one doing the damage. That's such a delicate balance. Were there moments when you went too far one way or the other, or was it just feeling it out as you went?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think one of the things that I liked about writing that first scene, and why I'm okay with reading it, even though it's a really painful, sort of brutal moment, is that it leads directly into Becky's first idea. And it is an idea that will help her dad turn the business around. And it comes directly out of this experience. And so to me, it kickstarts kind of what I think of as Becky's superpower, which is her ability to bounce back, her ability to get hit with bad news and to turn it around and make a success. And she is, she's a ball buster. Like, she is all out to get what she wants. And in this case, she really wants to punish that man and to help her dad save the business. And I think that, it is hard to know, like, are you loading the deck? Are you, making it too easy for us to sympathize with her? But to be honest, this kind of event that I write about is all too common, as we know. It's not necessarily something that stands out, unfortunately. And I think that Becky happens to be a woman in a man's world here, especially since she grows up without a mother, and she's in with her father very close, and his business, sort of farming tools, is one that's almost entirely men. So when she begins to help him take over the business, she becomes this sort of mogul in a world where women just almost are, nil. So to me, that was like a really interesting place to, to kind of start with for her character.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I'm only partially personally motivated here, but I want to talk about names and titles.
Okay.
And as a Rebecca,
yes, I know. Sorry.
I know. It's all, it was, I'm sure, inspired by me in so many ways. I'm, the two Rebeccas that I think mostly stick out to us from literature would be Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca, and then Becky Sharp from Thackeray's Vanity Fair. And I know that Becky Sharp was maybe partly on your mind. And then also, of course, the title of the book is, to most people, is going to evoke Patricia Highsmith's Talented Mr. Ripley. So can you talk a little bit about her name and also the title of the book?
Absolutely.
Because I know that was not the title all along.
No, I actually had a really tough time with the title. And as usual, I come to titles so late. I think novelists either know their title before they start and it's like they got it and it's done, or they're like me and they can have a book that's finished, sold, and sort of doesn't have a title.
I don't know anyone who comes to their title halfway through.
I know. It's either with titles or you're agonizing over it. And I'm definitely an agonizer. And it's funny because I had on my desk, or I had on my bulletin board in front of my desk, a list of inspirations for when I was writing this book. And they include everything from Thomas Cromwell in the Wolf Hall Hilary Mantel series to the Hound in Game of Thrones, because he has this quote that's everyone has to have a code. And that was one of my sort of touchstones.
I thought you were going with the Hound and the Hound of the Baskervilles, and I was so confused.
Yeah, no, not that Game of Thrones thing. And of course, I had Becky Sharp. I had Thackeray on there. I had Vanity Fair. That was a big inspiration for me. But I also had the Talented Mr. Ripley. And I think that when my eye fell on that one day, I thought that it would be the perfect way as an homage to a con artist story that really highlighted and emphasized the fact that she's a woman, right? It really flips the situation. And I think we're so attuned to that, the Talented Mr. Ripley is such a cultural touchstone that what I wanted to do was to kind of, of course, borrow a little of that glory, but also really emphasize that this is a woman and we don't usually see female con stories or con artist stories. And if we do see women leading double lives in fiction, it's really primarily in the relational area, right? It's like a woman cheating on her partner, or maybe leaving her family, or it has to do with the domestic sphere. And here in my book, I write a story about someone for whom relationships with people are really the second most important thing in her life, So that was kind of where the title came from. And in terms of the Becky, I definitely think I just landed on Becky Sharp. And I was like, this is a Becky Sharp type character. I really wanted to use Becky. And of course, I started it before the whole Beyonce Becky with the good hair came out. And for about a year.
Baby Got Back, though, technically. So it's been going on for a while. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess you know better than I, but I mean, for a little while, I remember being like, oh, is that all that it's going to be? Now we've moved on from, that name. But
yeah. It's amazing. Anyone who hasn't read Vanity Fair, it's the juiciest 19th century novel you could pick up. It's
and talk about how they didn't used to care about unlikable female heroines. I mean, why is it that now in fiction we have to like a woman in a novel? We don't have to be friends with these people. We just have to find a way to find them interesting enough to spend a novel wanting to know their experience,
Right. Yeah. And, you hope. At the same time, there's this part of me that knows when I write about a sketchier woman, a woman making less conventionally moral decisions, that seeps into reviews, whether professional or casual. It is a thing that there's even this infuriates me, but the statistic about, regardless of what women in novels do, when you look at the breakdown of novels that win awards, you look at the Pulitzer or whatever, and men and women in recent years as authors have been winning them in equal numbers. But when you look at novels that have women as a main character versus one that have men as the main character, it's really unusual. It's statistically far, far fewer novels that have women as the main character. that end up winning an award or getting taken seriously, essentially, is what this is an indicator of, right?
Yeah, that's disappointing.
But, you know, but you're going to prove them all wrong. So.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
I think at the same time, I think, you know, I think that what you're doing here is, you know, very, very helpfully not apologizing for it and just actually going full throttle. And I think that's what works so well.
From the draft you guys read in the writers group to when my editor read it, to the final form, I got more and more brave about focusing the story on Becky's sort of like just her all in, balls to the wall, you know, like getting what she wants in her crime. I think for a while I was like dancing around that, you know, I had like a couple different ways of approaching it. I think I was nervous about writing not just a character that was unlikable necessarily, because I never thought of her that way, but I was nervous about writing a novel that had a lot of big plot points. I mean, I'm a sort of a character girl, and this novel came from, I instantly saw who Becky was, even though she's very unlike me. And people who know me know that because she's very into math and I can't do math.
Like all writers are.
I knew her right away. I could totally see her and I wanted to follow her story. But there are also these major elements of like, it's a heist novel. There's giant money involved. There's the feds are an aspect. She's always worried about getting caught. There's some danger elements. And, you know, at first when I wrote this draft, I was pretty tentative about that. And then I think you guys and my editor kind of convinced me and gave me some like courage to be like, you know what, this is Becky. I have to go for it with this story and really let her, you know, be as intense and as, you know, epic in her crime as she can be.
Yeah. At the same time, and this is something that's not in the book anymore, so not to confuse anybody, but originally you had a second narrator, a second point of view, another woman at the other end of things, watching this all play out, like, you know, every other chapter kind of deal.
Frame narrative. And people who don't know what that means, it's like I had a character, if you think about The Great Gatsby, right? Nick is the frame character. He's the one who introduces the story and tells us about Gatsby, right? Gatsby's the big deal action, but we learn about it through Nick's perceptions. So I had a Nick version, a woman character, who sort of softened the story in a way by approaching it for us and giving us a buffer between us and Becky. And yeah, Kate, my editor, like, you know, just convinced me that really I was doing the main story a disservice by couching it in that way. And she was so right. I mean,
what I was going to ask or say was, you know, it didn't strike me this way at the time, but to hear you talk now, I wonder if to some extent that was shying away from this, you know, like that was a buffer between you or us and this really extreme character, that you were trying to give us an intermediary who was a little more likable and a little bit more understandable. And I loved her, but we didn't need her, actually.
Cutting her floor, she's gone. But I have to tell you something funny. So in preparation for today, I was like, when did I start working on this novel? Because I had all these versions, and so I like to get my big notebook, which is where I start every novel, and I spend a long time just kind of like writing, like,
whoa, by hand.
This is like a year of just journaling about the novel that I'm going to write. And if I flip to the first page, you can see here the date is October 24th, 2013.
1913. Courage, you guys.
And it says, the first line in this notebook says, a novel about a woman in a small Illinois town, works in the government office, over the course of 20-ish years, embezzles $50 million in order to fund art collection. So it's like, I had the novel there in, you know, on that date. It only took me, you know, this plus several drafts plus 7 years.
Yeah.
And here we are. So
it's amazing how close to that you landed, because I think for me, if I look back at my initial notes, it has nothing to do with where the novel ended up. That could be your back cover, for what you ended up with.
The elevator pitch for that novel. I knew it. I had it right there in my hand, you know?
Oh my God. And of course, I know there were still infinite surprises along the way for you as the writer and for us as readers, but you still, like, you saw it in that moment.
Yeah, I knew. I mean, I knew, I think I said this on social media somewhere, but like, you know, writing novels can be like such a grind. It can feel very brutal and hard. This one to me was nothing but joy. I mean, it was a long time and it was a lot of hard work, but it was like, I saw Becky right away. I loved the story. I loved her so much that I just felt like thrilled every time I came to work on it, you know, which is not, as you know, the norm, right?
Not necessarily. Yeah, really.
I was lucky with that one.
Oh my God. I'm going to ask you one last question from myself. And as I do that, everyone else can completely tune me out. I see that we have some questions ready to go, but if people want to use this chance to use the question box, that would be great. And the last thing I'm personally going to ask you, at least for now, is, you know, you did really well with your first two books. You had Commuters and Blue Stars, which are both beautiful novels. You had great editorial help. You had beautiful covers. You had everything. This book seems to be taking your career to a new level in many ways. Can you talk a little bit about what's happening with this book as your third book that might be different just career-wise? I don't know what you're allowed to say or not say, or things that you're excited about. But what's other than the contents, what is different about this book?
Well, I can't say some things, but I will say that you're right. There've been I'm so lucky. There's been great buzz about this. There's a lot of, you know, pre-pub notices. I was so excited to get to talk to Entertainment Weekly, and I was so excited to be in some roundups this, you know, sort of like of best fall books that are coming out. And honestly, the thing that I'm so super thrilled about, although I've been lucky with this in general, is like, I think my cover is the bomb. I'm so thrilled with it. I don't know if you can see people through the internet, but it's like a painting wrapped in paper with a torn out part there and little torn here. And also another thing is that they did these little like frames that looked like, you know, a portrait wall, and I don't know, the design is beautiful. And I'm just so, you guys know, the day you hold your book, it's like no other day. So I'm so happy and I'm so lucky with this one.
Yay. Yay. Cool, cool, cool. All right. I'm going to see some questions here. We had a question about
the chat roll, Rebecca. Have you seen the chat? Have you seen the chat roll? It's like everyone's just chatting away here. I love it.
It's amazing. And there's a question box too, which is what I'm looking at now. We have a question about the audiobook version. And before I ask you this question, I just want to say something I said in the chat box earlier, which is that if you're into audiobooks, as I am, but you have a good soul and would like to support women and children first rather than Amazon, not that, you know, I'm not saying you have a bad soul if you support Amazon. I'm just, you know, just saying this would be a good thing to do. Libro.fm is an incredible website and app. It's a great app that you can get on your phone. I like it better than the Audible app anyway. Emily just typed it in. That's perfect. And you, when you pay for an audiobook, your money, instead of going to Amazon, goes to the indie bookstore of your choice.
Yeah, you can choose so that when you're buying your audiobooks, the small indie bookstore of your choice will get a cut.
Rather than Jeff Bezos, who does not need another pool.
He doesn't need our money.
So on that note, can you talk about the making of the audiobook version is our question. Did you get to choose the voice this time? Did you have any?
I did. I got some selections from some amazing narrators, and I chose one that I loved. She actually read, what was the Taffy Ackner novel?
Yeah. Fleischman is in Trouble.
Fleischman is in Trouble.
That. Okay.
Narrator,
so great.
She's wonderful. And the funny thing is, they sent me, I want to say like a 10-page document on how to pronounce things. And I don't know if, like when you're a writer, you're just sort of like, la, 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 I'll just make up that word and I'll make up this word. And then someone asks you how to say it out loud, or it comes to the time when you have to read it, and you have no idea. Plus, since he's in the art world, it was like a ton of international, you know, languages, accents. So, I mean, I was just a mess. I was trying to research. I was spending a ton of time on like Google Translate, trying to do the accent. So listen, if you listen to the audiobook and there's something wrong, like that's on me. That's not the narrator. And also I have no idea. So yeah.
Oh my God. There are times I have to say, I think audiobook producers are doing better in recent years as audiobooks have grown in popularity. But back, 10 years ago, I used to get them just on CD from the library. And oh my God, there were some manglings. Sometimes it was like another language and you're like, oh, that person cannot speak French. But sometimes, oh my God, it was Karen Russell Swamplandia, the actress, the very young actress who read it kept saying, instead of archipelago, kept saying archipelago.
Oh,
God, is there no producer in the room? Please, please. But I think the quality on audio is so great now. And and the fact that you can still essentially buy it from Women and Children First, it's a deal maker for me. So, so we were just talking about the cover. I think you might have talked a lot about it, but the question is, how did it come about? Do you want to talk a little bit about any input that you had into the cover process?
Yeah, one cool thing is that when we came up with when the amazing art designer came up with the concept of the book, one thing that Custom House, which is a division of William Morrow, did is they hired actors. They did like a casting call and they sort of chose someone and took a photo of her, in a studio and then used it for this. So instead of like a stock photo, which I thought was like an amazing touch. And to me, it kind of gave it that much more like, kind of oomph in her look, which has a very sort of, saucy look. So that was one little bit of inside info.
That's fantastic. Yay. And I'm so honored to have my blurb on the cover too, which I feel completely unworthy of.
It's all amazing to see that there.
Unworthy. We have a bunch of questions that I'm going to kind of lump together. They're asking a bit about the original inspiration, and I wonder some of those they might have asked that before we talked about this too, like how you first heard of this and to what extent you based it on the real woman. I am going to ask a question that we just got in addition to that from Dika, which is, I guess I'm going to make this a two-part question and ask, about research in general, research into the actual woman from Dixon, Illinois, and what she did and how things turned out for her, but also research into Becky's world as an art collector and that entire art world, which of course is not original to the true story of this embezzler from Dixon.
Right. Yeah. So as I think I said earlier, when I knew I was going to write this novel, I really wanted to preserve that imaginative space. So I stopped reading anything about the true story. I didn't follow it at all. After I wrote the book, I went back and fact-checked the numbers just to make sure the timeline and the numbers were correct. But I don't know anything about Ms. Crundwell, who is the name of Rita Crundwell, who is in federal prison for this crime. And so that's one thing to know. The second thing is that in terms of the art world, so for research, I didn't have to do that much for this because sometimes you'll have just like an interest, like I'm not an art collector. I'm not some sort of in the know, art person, but I've always liked it. I've always enjoyed going to galleries, museums. I used to have a subscription to Art Forum for no real reason. And I like that world. I like following the personalities. I like, the drama. And so people are, when people ask, what research did you do? It's almost like I'd already done the research by having a deep interest in it. And then I could tweak it a little bit by, mixing up some of the artists that she, buys from and some ones I made up. And that was kind of interesting too. So, yeah.
I'm going to combine two more questions. I like combining questions because it makes me feel like a teacher. So we have a question about whether Becky arrived to you fully formed, or did she evolve and reveal herself to you as she wrote? And the other question on here is from someone wondering whether they are going to hate her, and pity her or kill her, which I would say all of the above probably, but I'll hear you answer that.
She arrived fully formed, absolutely fully formed. I felt like I knew her. I felt like she walked into my apartment and I could talk to her. And I loved the parts of her that were sort of like, you know, difficult. I loved the part of her where she's so desperately ambitious. I loved the fact that she never takes no for an answer. And I love the fact that she's devoted to her town in a real way, even as she steals from them. That's maybe hard to get now, but hopefully if you read it, you'll know what I mean. And she's not like me at all in the sense that in the way and the circumstances she grew up, in what she's, you know, devoted to, in the fact that she's an avid churchgoer and that she, you know, has these, you know, deep sort of skills in terms of math and accounting and business success. I don't know what to say other than like, I knew her right away and I loved her right away. And maybe that doesn't say too many great things about me, but I knew she was going to be a character I loved to write about. And and will you hate her? You know, maybe you'll hate it and throw it across the room. But I do think that what I tried to do was to make, if you can't, for example, sympathize with her crimes, hopefully you can sympathize with her experience. So like there's a scene where she is racing to deposit a check or else she might get caught. And it's a panicky scene and there's obstacles in her way and she's desperate and she's frightened and there are ridiculous things that she has to surmount and everything's on the line. And even if we can't, you know, sort of like understand what it's like to be an epic criminal, we've all been in that space of feeling panicky and afraid to be caught and worried that our mistakes are going to be exposed and that we're going to be vulnerable. So I really tried to channel her human experience that I think that maybe that's what people can connect to, even if they're going to be like, you know, what's this crazy criminal got to do with my life, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. We have another question that might be a good one to end on-ish, although I might ask you something else myself, which is what you are working on next and / how many things do you work on at once?
Yeah, good question. I usually only work on one thing at a time, or I should say one big fiction project. I'll usually have something like an essay or a nonfiction, you know, maybe an interview I'm doing for a magazine or a review. And then in terms of what I'm doing next, it's kind of funny because I can't really say what it is, but I will say that I designed the circumstances of it to fit the pandemic and the quarantine. So let me say it like this. You know, we're all in a tough time. I don't have to explain that to anybody. We all have a lot of people maybe in our house if you have parents. I have kids who are doing remote school from my apartment. We're all together. We're all working from home. And I needed something that was going to cheer me up. And I remember one day I was running on the treadmill and I thought, you know what, I wish I had a book that I could work on that was fun and absorbing and maybe a little bit like, you know, sexy, maybe something kind of light, maybe something that was about, you know, a way like being outside, since I can't do that very much. And so I started writing that book. And in a weird way, I sort of like designed these parameters for myself, almost like I gave myself these requirements, these boundaries. And so that's kind of what I'm working on now. It came directly out of not like some deep artistic, you know, like, you know, genius idea, but it was mainly like, what do I need right now when I come to my writing desk? And that's what I need.
Yeah, because it's ultimately like, you know, it's one thing if you're working on a short story, but if you're writing a novel, it's like you're choosing to move to that country for 3 or 4 years. Like you gotta really, first of all, love it and find enough there to write about, but also you gotta want to be there. Whether that's I mean, sometimes it's a really dark place that you want to be, but sometimes it's a escapist place that you want to be. So it'll be interesting too to see, you know, the books coming out in 3 or 4 years. What were all of us writing in this time? Right. And for some of us, like for me, I'm finishing something. So, you know, it didn't come out of this moment, although it's certainly influenced by it. But I'm really curious about the novels started in 2020.
I know, I'm curious. I think mine might never see the outside of my like writer's room. I mean, it might just be what I needed during this time, because I like to be writing a novel. That's where I like to be in my mind. And maybe I need that right now, you know?
If you needed it right now, probably we need it right now too. So, you know, it's interesting. You know, I feel like when I like you, I was a, you know, English lit major. And we never talked about the circumstances of writing. We would talk about like, oh, this book came out in 1930, so it must be referring to the stock market crash of 1929, not thinking like, oh, it takes at least 5 years to write a novel. Yeah. When did this person start writing this? That never came up, you know?
Yeah. No, the circumstances, you know, in which something's produced are really, really interesting, you know?
Yeah. Yay. So, okay. If you, I'm going to end with one last question, which is—
I have one for you too.
Oh, what's that?
I'm going to ask you mine now, because I'm going to— Rebecca, what are you reading these days? What's a good— you want to shout out something?
Okay, so yeah, I was a judge for the National Book Award this year, which means I was reading nothing but American fiction written, like published in 2020, which was an interesting experience. And now that I am on hiatus from that, I just dove straight into ton of French audiobooks.
Oh, good idea.
Irish mysteries. We were talking about audio before, and I'll say—
she's a master.
Yeah, my go-to on audiobooks is ones where in my head I would mangle the accent. Like if I tried to do an Irish accent in my head, it would sound like the Lucky Charms leprechaun. So like a great Irish actor though is going to do like multiple variegations of Irish accent. Ton of French on audio. If you're, as long as people promise to do Libre FM and buy it from women and children, just like escapist, dark, but not too dark.
Smart and twisty and character. I listened to The Witch Elm, I think it was last year.
Yes.
And that was so good.
Yeah, that's her standalone. And then she has all these other ones that are part of the Dublin Murder Squad. And there's a new one. I don't know if it came out today. I think it's either today.
I've ended up on lists with her about new releases, and I think it's today.
It's either today or it's next Tuesday. It's one or the other. Yeah. So that's just like my escapist I was like, I can't read another American fiction published in 2020 at this moment. Right. So it was going to be, you know, so Irish is what I went to. What I was going to ask you as our closing question is, people have just had this sublime experience listening to you read this amazing book. Hopefully they have it in hand, or they are going to download it on audio from Women and Children tonight and start listening or reading.
Smash that button, everybody.
Yes. In the next hour, should those same people watch the debate?
Oh boy.
Or not? And if they do, what should they be drinking or taking to get through it? And if not, what should they be doing instead?
Good question. I have to say that I myself am not going to watch the debate. Everyone else in my family is, and they're going to update me later. In about 20 minutes, I'm going to be in pajamas on my couch, reading and finishing this awesome glass of champagne. And that kind of sounds like a perfect night to me, but you do you, people. Maybe you want to go tune into the debate now.
But I'm glad, you would not want to ruin your pub date by them turning that on. Like, that would be the saddest,
Today's been amazing. I can't end it like that. So, you know what? But you know what? People, different strokes, man.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
some of them are you going to go tune in?
I think I am. Okay. I think I'm going to do some Duolingo Spanish with my 10-year-old first.
Okay.
And I'm going to turn it on once it's already going and see who's sweating more.
Well, you can text me the highlights and the lowlights. And
perfect. Yes.
This is a good time for me to say thank you to everybody here. I've been watching your comments. I haven't been reading them, but I just see them scrolling by, and it means a ton to me for you guys to be here. Thank you so, so much. And thank you, Rebecca. These questions were amazing. Yay, there's Sarah. Thank you, Sarah.
Yes, thank you. That was such a fabulous conversation. I loved how feminist it got. It was awesome. So thank you all. We had 100 people in the room, which is amazing. So thanks all 100 of you for tuning in. If you missed the event, I know someone who missed it, we're going to send a link to the recording to everyone who registered. So that'll be on our YouTube channel. And just another reminder to order the book or order Rebecca's book. It's available now. And I think Emily's going to sign copies later this week.
I am.
All right. Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful night. Good luck.
Everybody, this was amazing.